I was tied up in an abandoned warehouse, and the kidnappers called my husband Ethan. His true love, Vivian, snatched the phone and cried pitifully on the other end, "Ethan, come quickly. My sister and I have been kidnapped, they want 100 million. I shook my head desperately, making muffled sounds through the rag in my mouth. The kidnappers only demanded 5 million, but she directly raised it to 100 million. She hung up the phone, kicked me in the chest, her eyes filled with venom. Guess what? Will he pay 100 million for you? Or will he just watch you get killed? 3 hours later, Ethan's call came through. He could only offer 50 million to save Vivian. As for me, he told the kidnappers to kill me, because he wouldn't give a single penny. Vivian laughed hysterically, but I slowly stood up amid the kidnappers' terrified gazes. In fact, I was also one of the kidnappers. Kill her, I won't give a penny for Selena. Ethan's voice came from the other end, cold as winter iron, each word piercing my heart precisely. The kidnappers had put it on speaker, and the sound echoed in the empty warehouse, carrying a cruel verdict. Vivian beside me, Ethan's true love, was stunned at first, then burst into sharp, triumphant laughter. She laughed so hard she doubled over, tears streaming down. Did you hear that, Selena? He wants you dead. He only wants me. Ha ha ha. She wore an expensive white dress, trembling slightly with excitement, like a blooming white lotus laced with poison. I was tied to a pillar, a rag stuffed in my mouth, only able to make desperate muffled sounds. Vivian savored my miserable state, hung up the phone, walked over, and kicked me in the chest. The intense pain made me arch my body instantly. Guess what? Will he pay 100 million for you? Or will he just watch you get killed? Her venomous words before hanging up still echoed in my ears. Now, the answer was revealed. Not 100 million, not even a penny. In his heart, my life as Selena was worthless. Vivian laughed hysterically, the two kidnappers behind her exchanged glances. One with a scarred face stepped forward, hesitantly saying, "Miss Vivian, this isn't what we agreed on. If Ethan doesn't pay, how can we kill her?" Vivian's laughter stopped abruptly, she glanced impatiently at the scarred face. "What's the rush? Ethan said 50 million, only to redeem me. Once he sends the money and you get it, just kill this woman then." She turned to me again, her face full of undisguised superiority. "See that, Selena? This is the difference. You thought marrying him for 3 years could replace my place in his heart? You're just a cheap substitute. Now that I'm back, you're not even that, you're just garbage to be disposed of." I hung my head, long hair covering my face, shoulders shaking violently as if from crying. The scarred face and his accomplice exchanged a glance, seeming to agree with Vivian. They were hired by my husband's true love, Vivian, to kidnap both of us and stage a scene where Ethan heroically saves the beauty, ultimately winning her back. The kidnappers' original plan was to demand 5 million, which Ethan would pay readily, making him appear deeply devoted. But Vivian was too greedy and eager to see me humiliated, so she arbitrarily raised it to 100 million. She wanted to use 100 million to measure her weight in Ethan's heart, while trampling me into the mud. Now, she had succeeded. Ethan was willing to pay 50 million for her but wanted me dead. Watching her victorious posture, my shoulders shook more intensely. But it wasn't crying, it was laughter. Unseen by Vivian and the two kidnappers, my hands tied behind me had somehow untied the ropes. I slowly lifted my head, making muffled sounds, my eyes filled with fear and pleading. Vivian loved seeing me like this the most. She squatted down, pinched my chin, forcing me to look at her. "Beg me, Selena. Maybe if I'm in a good mood, I'll let Ethan redeem you too." "Oh, I forgot, your mouth is gagged." She smiled, reaching to pull the rag from my mouth. The moment her hand touched me, I moved. I spat out the rag forcefully, saliva and all, landing precisely on Vivian's meticulously made-up face. "Tooey." Vivian's smile froze, she screamed, retreating sharply, frantically wiping her face with the back of her hand. "Ah. Selena, you bitch. The two kidnappers were stunned, not reacting to how I had escaped. I gave them no time. As I spat out the rag, I sprang up like an arrow from a bowstring from behind the pillar. My body twisted at a strange angle, kicking the scarred face's wrist holding the knife. Crack! The crisp sound of bone breaking. The scarred face screamed in agony, the knife flying from his hand. I caught it mid-air, flipped it, and the cold blade was already at the other kidnapper's throat. The entire process took no more than 3 seconds, incredibly fast. The warehouse fell into instant silence, broken only by the scarred face's painful howls clutching his wrist and Vivian's terrified gasps. She looked at me as if seeing a ghost, her disgust and triumph replaced by immense fear. You. I twirled the knife in my hand, drawing a shallow blood line on the other kidnapper's neck. The kidnapper stiffened in fear, not daring to move. Heroine, spare me. Heroine, spare me. I slowly curled my lips into a bloodthirsty smile, my gaze passing over him to land on Vivian's pale face. Now, it's my turn to ask you. I walked toward her step by step, the knife still dripping blood. Guess what? If I make you call Ethan, tell him you've been kidnapped by me, and ask for 100 million to ransom you, will he pay? Or will he, just watch me kill you? Vivian collapsed in fear, a foul odor even emanating from her pants. She shook like a leaf in the autumn wind, her gaze filled with disbelief. You're not Selena. Who are you? In her eyes, Selena was just a docile, enduring housewife who could be easily manipulated. I walked to her, squatted down, and patted her bloodless face with the back of the knife. I am Selena. I smiled gently. The foolish Selena in your eyes who would give up everything for love. Also the pitiful Selena who could only wait to die if her husband said so. My voice was soft, but each word pierced Vivian's ears like an ice pick. She shook even harder. No, impossible. I ignored her, stood up, and looked at the two terrified kidnappers. How much did Vivian pay you? I asked. The scarred face, clutching his broken wrist, sweating profusely in pain, stammered, F5, 500,000, another 500,000 after it's done. 1 million to stage such a big show? I sneered. How cheap. I pulled a black card from my inner coat pocket and tossed it in front of them. There's 10 million in this. Now, you work for me. Tie her up. Make it tight. I pointed the knife tip at Vivian on the ground. The two kidnappers looked at the black card on the ground, then at me, their eyes mixing greed and fear. They unhesitatingly chose the former. People die for wealth, birds for food. They immediately got up, picked up the ropes, and clumsily bound the screaming, struggling Vivian tightly, stuffing the rag that had just been mine into her mouth. MMPH. Vivian struggled desperately, her eyes full of malice and terror. I walked to her, stepped on her pretty face, and ground it slightly. Kicking me in the chest felt good, right? MMPH. She shook her head violently, tears mixing with dirt streaming down. Now, it's my turn. I lifted my foot, then stomped down hard. Bang! This kick landed on her abdomen. Vivian let out a muffled groan, curling up like a shrimp, vomiting her overnight meal in a filthy mess. I stepped back in disgust, watching her in pain, but felt no satisfaction, only a cold emptiness in my heart. In 3 years of marriage, for Ethan, I cooked and cleaned, suppressed all my sharpness and past, striving to be the perfect wife. I thought hearts were made of flesh, if I couldn't warm a block of ice, I could warm a person. But I was wrong. In Ethan's heart, I never compared to his true love, Vivian. A year ago, I got pregnant. Holding the pregnancy test, wanting to surprise him, I saw him at the company entrance, anxiously carrying Vivian to the hospital. Vivian had only sprained her ankle. As I chased after them, I was hit by a truck running a red light, falling to the ground. Blood spread from beneath me. Lying on the cold ground, in my last blurry moment of consciousness, I saw Ethan's car parked nearby. He saw me, but only glanced indifferently before carrying Vivian into the hospital without looking back. The child I had long anticipated was gone. I nearly died in that accident too. Later, I learned it wasn't an accident at all. It was Vivian. To smoothly return to Ethan's side after coming back, she bribed the driver to create that accident. And Ethan knew all along. He acquiesced. Because there was a project needing investment from Vivian's father. So, my child became the sacrifice for their love and career. From the moment I lay in a pool of blood and saw his indifferent gaze, the naive, foolish Selena died. What survived was a vengeful demon existing only for revenge. I pulled back my thoughts, my cold gaze returning to Vivian. Make the call. I ordered the kidnapper whose hand wasn't broken. Use your phone to call Ethan. The kidnapper dared not disobey, immediately pulling out his phone and dialing Ethan's number. The call connected quickly. Is the money ready? Where is my person? Ethan's voice was still calm, as if discussing a business deal. I took the phone from the kidnapper, put it on speaker. Then, I stepped on Vivian's fingers, grinding hard. Ah! A heart-wrenching scream erupted from Vivian's mouth, clear even through the rag, transmitting to the other end. Ethan's voice changed immediately. Vivian? What have you done to her? Ethan, long time no see. I chuckled lightly. The other end fell into dead silence. After a full 10 seconds, Ethan's incredulous, trembling voice came. Selena? How is it you? Surprised? I chuckled lightly, increasing the pressure under my foot, making Vivian's screams more piercing. Weren't you supposed to be killed? Why? Why am I still alive? Why is the one being tortured now your precious darling? I finished his sentence for him, my tone full of sarcasm. Ethan, let's play a new game. Vivian is in my hands now. 100 million, not a penny less. Deliver it to this abandoned warehouse in the west of the city within 3 hours. Oh, and come alone. If I see police or any extra people. I bent down, bringing the phone to Vivian's ear, the blade lightly grazing her cheek. I'll carve a turtle on her pretty face, one cut at a time. Ah. Ethan. Save me. Save me. This lunatic. She's crazy. Vivian completely broke down, crying and begging for help. Ethan roared on the other end, Selena. You dare. Do you know what you're doing? This is illegal. Illegal? I laughed as if hearing the biggest joke. A year ago, when you conspired to run over my child, why didn't you think about the law? The breathing on the other end hitched sharply. Ethan, you think I don't know anything? You traded my child's life for the Chu family's investment, making your company go public successfully. When you hold Vivian at night, do you ever dream of that unborn child you killed with your own hands? My voice wasn't loud, but each word struck the heart. What nonsense are you talking? Ethan's voice carried a hint of panic. Nonsense? I sneered, pulled out another phone from my pocket, opened a recording, and played it by the phone. It was the recording of Vivian's call with the truck driver. Make it clean, leave no traces. You won't be short on money. Yes, Ethan's wife, make her miscarry, best if it's one corpse 2 lives. Vivian's malicious voice came through clearly. The other end went completely silent. In the warehouse, the bound Vivian stopped struggling, looking at me in disbelief, as if unable to understand why I had this recording. I turned off the recording, put the phone back to my ear, my voice cold as ice. Still think I'm talking nonsense? I'll give you 3 hours, 100 million for her life. Or you can call the police and bet whether they arrive faster or my knife does. By the way, I backed up this recording in many places. If anything happens to me, they'll immediately appear in major media and police inboxes. Then, you and your dear Vivian, and your thriving G group, what fate awaits you, I don't need to say more, right? After speaking, I gave him no time to react and hung up directly. I tossed the phone back to the kidnapper, dragged a chair, sat in front of Vivian, and looked at her leisurely. Now, let's chat. Vivian looked at me in terror, making muffled sounds, shaking her head desperately. I signaled the kidnapper to remove the rag from her mouth. She immediately gasped for air, then screamed hoarsely, "Selena, you lunatic! You'll die a horrible death." Slap. I backhanded her, drawing blood from her mouth corner. "Whether I die or not isn't up to you. But whether you die or not is up to me now." I lifted her chin with the knife tip. "I'm not curious if Ethan will pay 100 million to save you. I just want to see, in his heart, whether you, his true love, are more important, or his business empire. He'll come. He'll definitely come to save me." Vivian seemed to be convincing me, or herself. "Is that so?" I smiled. "Then let's wait and see." Time passed minute by minute. The atmosphere in the warehouse was oppressively tense. The two kidnappers stood in the corner, not daring to breathe loudly. They now fully understood what kind of person they had provoked. Vivian went from initial malicious curses, to later tearful pleas, to now despairing silence. The 3 hours felt like 3 centuries. My phone never rang. The light in Vivian's eyes faded bit by bit. She finally realized that Ethan might really not come. Just as everyone in the warehouse thought Ethan had abandoned her, the rusted warehouse door was suddenly kicked open from outside with a boom. A tall figure appeared in the doorway against the light. It was Ethan. He brought no money, no police. He only brought a gun. The dark muzzle pointed precisely at my forehead. "Selena, release Vivian." His voice was even colder than on the phone, filled with killing intent. When Vivian saw him and the gun in his hand, her originally dead eyes instantly burst with ecstatic light. "Ethan! You came! I knew you'd come to save me. Kill her. Kill this bitch quickly." She shrieked madly. I looked at that familiar face, the one I had loved for 3 years, now filled with ruthlessness and killing intent. Not only was I not afraid, but I laughed, tears almost coming out. "Ethan, you really refresh my perception of your shamelessness time and again." I slowly stood up, spread my arms, fully exposing myself to his gun. "Come on, shoot. Aim here." I pointed to my heart. Ethan's pupils contracted sharply, his knuckles whitened from gripping the gun. He stared at me intently, his expression complex, anger, shock, and a trace of emotion I couldn't understand. "You think I don't dare?" He gritted his teeth, voice squeezing through. "You do dare." I smiled even brighter. "For Vivian, you'd dare anything. You dared to acquiesce to her running over our child, now, naturally, you'd dare shoot me, your wife. Do it, Ethan. Let me give up completely." My words hammered his heart heavily. The killing intent in his eyes wavered slightly. "Ethan! Don't listen to her nonsense. She's stalling. Kill her. Once she's dead, we'll have no problems." Vivian continued to fan the flames madly from the side. Ethan's gaze shifted between me and Vivian, his expression fluctuating. I knew what he was hesitating about. Killing me was simple. But that recording was like the sword of Damocles over his head. He didn't dare gamble. At this tense moment, uniformed footsteps suddenly sounded from all directions in the warehouse. Men in black combat suits, faces painted in camouflage, holding weapons, emerged like ghosts from the shadows, surrounding the warehouse completely. Their aura of lethality made the warehouse temperature seem to drop several degrees. The two small-time kidnappers' legs weakened, kneeling directly on the ground, unable to even beg for mercy. Ethan's face turned ashen instantly. The courage and killing intent he brought crumbled upon seeing this group. The gun in his hand seemed ridiculous. The leading man walked to me, removed his tactical goggles, revealing a sharp-featured face. He bowed respectfully. "Miss, we arrived late." I waved my hand, my gaze still locked on Ethan. "Not late, Leo, just in time." I looked at the pale-faced Ethan, his lips trembling, my smile growing colder. "Forgot to introduce myself, Ethan. I, Selena. On the surface, your unworthy wife." In reality, the sole heir to the Sioux security group. Sioux security? Ethan murmured, his eyes filled with horror. The Sioux family entrenched in the Golden Triangle's gray areas, even governments fear them? Seems you're not too ignorant. I walked to him, gently taking the gun from his stiff hand. I weighed the gun in my hand, then pressed the muzzle to his forehead, just as he had done to me. Now, let's play another game. I have one bullet here. I ejected the magazine, leaving only one round, then reloaded with a crisp click. You and her, only one can live. I moved the muzzle from his forehead to Vivian nearby. Vivian screamed in terror, shaking like a sieve. Who do you choose? I asked Ethan, word by word. Ethan's Adam's apple bobbed, cold sweat slid down his temples, soaking his collar. He looked at me, then at the tear-streaked Vivian nearby, his eyes rapidly shifting between fear, struggle, and calculation. This was a dead end. He knew better than anyone. No matter who he chose, he wouldn't leave this warehouse today. I just wanted to watch one more show before he died, see how ridiculous his so-called unwavering love was in the face of life and death. He spoke with difficulty, his voice extremely hoarse. I choose. Time seemed infinitely stretched at this moment. Vivian stopped screaming, looking at him with eyes full of expectation. That was her last hope. Finally, Ethan closed his eyes, as if using all his strength, and spat out 2 words. Choose her. He pointed to Vivian. He said, choose her to live. Vivian's face instantly bloomed with the ecstasy of survival. But my smile didn't change at all. I just lightly said oh, then without hesitation, aimed the gun at Vivian. Bang! The gunshot exploded in the warehouse. Vivian's ecstatic expression froze, a blood hole appeared in her forehead, blood and brain matter slowly flowing out. To her death, her eyes held that triumph and disbelief. She thought since he chose her, she won. She never understood that I hate others making decisions for me the most. Ethan opened his eyes sharply, seeing Vivian fall stiffly, completely stunned. As if all strength was drained, he collapsed to the ground, murmuring, why? I chose her, why? Because I wanted her dead. I put away the gun, looking down at him, my tone light as discussing the weather. You choose her, I kill her. You choose yourself, I'd still kill her. From the beginning, she had to die. As for you. I squatted down, pinched his chin, forcing him to look into my eyes. Those eyes that once captivated me now held only endless fear. Killing you would be too easy. I want you alive, Ethan. I want you to watch yourself fall from the clouds, lose everything, struggle in the mud, and finally starve to death on the streets like a dog. Ethan was taken away by my people. I didn't kill him immediately, that would be too easy. I wanted him alive to watch everything he painstakingly built crumble into nothing. I wanted him to taste the pain and despair I endured, 100-fold. As for the 2 kidnappers hired by Vivian, I kept my promise. I had Leo give them the card with 10 million and escort them out. Whether they could leave the area alive was not my concern. Money from the Sioux family isn't that easy to take. After handling everything in the warehouse, I returned to my and Ethan's home. That exquisitely decorated villa still retained traces of our life. At the entrance, his changed shoes, on the living room coffee table, his unfinished finance magazine, on the balcony, the orchids I planted for him. Everything seemed as if nothing had happened. But I knew it was all over. I entered our bedroom, opened the closet. Half my clothes, half his. Expressionlessly, I took out all his clothes one by one and threw them on the ground. Suits, shirts, ties, each one I had personally ironed smooth. Then, I took out a lighter. The flame rose, quickly devouring the expensive fabrics. Black smoke filled the room, choking. I stood before the fire, watching quietly. The flickering light on my face seemed to burn the 3 years of love and hate, along with my dead heart, to ashes. The next day, G Group stock hit the limit down at opening. Scandals about Chairman Ethan conspiring with his lover to attempt to murder his wife, and involved in multiple commercial crimes, spread across the city overnight. Those recordings and evidence were sent precisely to major media and regulatory departments in an untraceable way by me. When the wall falls, everyone pushes. Those who once flattered him now avoided him. Companies cooperating with G terminated contracts, banks stopped loans, shareholders sold stocks frantically. A business empire teetered on collapse in just days. As Ethan's legal wife and the biggest victim, I naturally stepped forward. I held a press conference. Before the cameras, in an elegant white long dress, pale-faced and haggard, I portrayed the image of a victim doubly betrayed by husband and best friend perfectly. Tearfully, I accused Ethan and Vivian of their crimes, recounting the pain of losing my child and the fear of being kidnapped and extorted by them. Of course, I omitted the part where I turned the tables. In my account, the police arrived in time, shot the vicious kidnapper Vivian, and rescued me and the coerced Ethan. Public opinion fully turned to me. Everyone sympathized with this poor woman, cursing Ethan and Vivian's shamelessness and viciousness. Under the dual pressure of opinion and evidence, G Group's board had to dismiss Ethan as chairman. Using the Sue family's behind-the-scenes operations and my status as wife, I gradually acquired control of G Group. When I saw Ethan again with the equity transfer document, he was confined in a sunless basement. In just days, he was haggard, bearded, eyes vacant, no longer the spirited man of before. Like a stray dog, he curled in the corner. I tossed the document in front of him. "Look, everything you prided yourself on is now mine." He trembled, picking it up, seeing my signature. His murky eyes finally showed some spark, extreme anger and unwillingness. "Selena, what a vicious heart!" he roared, trying to lunge, but chained firmly. "Vicious?" I laughed. "Compared to you, I'm far from it. I'm just taking back what should be mine." "No. G is mine. I built it single-handedly." He looked mad. "Is that so?" I slowly squatted, meeting his eyes. "Forgot? Who gave you the first startup capital?" Ethan's roar stopped abruptly. "It was my dad. Seeing how much I loved you and insisted on marrying you, he secretly gave you $5 million anonymously. Your company's first big project nearly bankrupted due to broken capital chain, who helped behind the scenes, pulling strings for investment? My brother. He pitted me suffering with you and used the Sue family's connections. Ethan, without the Sue family, you're nothing. Your so-called business empire is built on my family's love for me. Yet you used that love to hurt and betray me. You destroyed everything of mine. Now, I'm just taking it back." Ethan was completely stunned. Mouth agape, he looked at me as if seeing me for the first time. So, his proud success, his self-made myth, was a joke from start to finish. He was just a pitiful worm who succeeded thanks to his wife's family support. This realization hurt him more than death. Pfft, he spat a mouthful of blood, falling straight back. I looked at him indifferently, without sympathy. "Live well, Ethan. The good show has just begun." I didn't let Ethan die. I had him treated, then threw him into the most chaotic area of the Golden Triangle. There, no law, no order, only primitive survival of the fittest. The once lofty Ethan was less than a dog there. He'd be beaten, humiliated, fighting stray dogs for a moldy bun. He'd spend his remaining life tasting hell. This was the best punishment for him. After taking over G Group, I implemented sweeping reforms. First, purging all of Ethan's old subordinates and confidants. Then, I renamed the company to Sue Group. I was no longer the Selena hiding behind a man, I was Selena, the helmsman of Sue Group. I began gradually legitimizing the Sue family's gray area businesses, merging them with Sue Group's operations. This was a massive project, but I had plenty of patience and means. My daily schedule was packed: meetings, negotiations, signing contracts. Busyness was the cure for everything. It left me no time to think about those painful pasts. Days passed. Under my leadership, Sue Group flourished, more brilliant than under Ethan. I became a legendary figure in the business world. People knew me as decisive and ruthless, but no one knew my past. That day, after finishing an international video conference, my secretary knocked. "Selena, a Mr. Adrian is here to see you. No appointment, but he says you'll definitely meet him." "Adrian?" A gentle, jade-like face flashed in my mind. "Let him in." Moments later, a man in a white coat, gold-rimmed glasses, entered. Seeing me, he smiled slightly, eyes curving. "Selena, long time no see." It was Adrian, my senior from university, and once my suitor. He was a top surgeon. Back then, if I hadn't fallen headfirst into Ethan's pit, perhaps. "Senior Adrian," I stood, extending my hand. "What brings you here?" He shook my hand, quickly releasing, his gaze sweeping my office, finally landing on me. "I saw the news, I'm happy for you." His voice was gentle. "Thanks." I gestured for him to sit on the sofa. "Something to drink?" "No need." He shook his head, expression turning serious. "I came today to tell you, Ethan escaped." My hand holding the coffee cup paused slightly. "Escaped?" "Yes." Adrian nodded. "Half a month ago, he escaped from the Golden Triangle. Our people have been tracking him, but his anti-surveillance skills are strong, he evaded several times. Only yesterday did we find out he smuggled back into the country." I set down the coffee cup, brow slightly furrowed. I underestimated him. Surviving in that place and escaping successfully, Ethan does have some ability. What does he want coming back? Revenge on me? I sneered. A penniless stray dog, what can he use for revenge? I'm afraid, it's not just revenge. Adrian's expression grew more grave. We found he contacted someone after returning. Who? Vivian's brother, Jason. Jason? I remembered him, a spoiled playboy, as stupid and poisonous as his sister. After Vivian's death, the Chu family quickly declined due to implications. Jason should hate me to the bone. Ethan mixing with him definitely has no good intentions. What are they planning? I asked. I don't know. Adrian shook his head. But according to tips, they've recently bought a batch of high-explosive dynamite on the streets at high price. Dynamite? My heart sank sharply. Looks like they want to play for keeps with me. I see. My face was grim. Thank you, Senior Adrian. I owe you one. Between us, no need for that. Adrian looked at me with a hint of worry. Selena, you must be careful. Ethan is now a mad dog, capable of anything. I understand. After seeing Adrian off, I immediately called Leo. Find Ethan and Jason's whereabouts. Use all resources, I want to know where they are and what they're planning within 24 hours. Yes, Mississippi. Hanging up, I stood before the huge floor-to-ceiling window, looking at the bustling city below. The sunset's afterglow dyed the sky a magnificent blood red. A storm is coming. Ethan, you'd better not disappoint me. I'm waiting for you to deliver yourself. Ethan was more patient than I imagined. For 3 consecutive days, no news from Leo. He and Jason had vanished without a trace. This gave me a bad feeling. Anomalies indicate trouble. The deeper they hid, the bigger their plot must be. The 4th day was the anniversary of losing that child. In past years, I'd lock myself at home, going nowhere. But this year, I decided to visit him. I cancelled all work, drove alone to the suburban cemetery. I had set up a small cenotaph for him. I placed a bunch of white daisies gently before the tombstone, brushing off the dust with my hand. Baby, Mommy's here to see you. My voice choked a bit. No matter how strong and unbreakable I became, he was forever the softest, most painful spot in my heart. I squatted before the tombstone, chattering to him about my recent work, funny things I encountered, as if he were still by my side. Just as I was about to leave, a cold voice suddenly sounded behind me. Selena, you really have the nerve to come to see him. My body stiffened, I turned sharply. Ethan. He wore a black hoodie, mask on face, only revealing bloodshot eyes full of malice. He was thinner than last time, more sinister, like a zombie crawled from hell. In his hand, a black remote control. My heart jumped, my gaze instinctively scanned around. Under nearby trees, I saw disturbed soil. Dynamite. They had buried dynamite here. You finally showed up. I slowly stood, looking at him coldly. Of course I would. Ethan laughed, his voice hoarse and ugly. I want to watch you go down to accompany my Vivian, and your bastard. Bastard? My eyes chilled. Ethan, that was your child too. My child? He laughed as if hearing a joke. Don't forget, when you got pregnant, we'd been sleeping separately for 3 months. Whose bastard it is, you know in your heart. I was stunned. Separate rooms? Yes, we were in a Cold War then, sleeping separately. But once, he got drunk, entered the wrong room, that's when I got pregnant. But now, from his words, he doesn't remember at all? Or he simply refuses to admit it? Today, I'll reunite your family of 3 underground. Ethan laughed madly, raising the remote. Goodbye, my dear ex-wife. He pressed the red button. I closed my eyes. The expected explosion didn't happen. Ethan's laughter stopped abruptly. He looked at the remote in disbelief, pressing madly several times. Still no response. What's wrong? Why? Looking for this? A lazy voice came from the woods behind him. Jason was carried like a chick and thrown out from the woods, falling flat on his face. Leo and his men emerged, holding signal jammers and dismantled wires. Miss, mission accomplished. Leo nodded to me. Ethan looked at the scene, completely dumbfounded. No, impossible, how did you find out? From the moment you smuggled back, your whereabouts have been under my control. I walked toward him step by step. Including contacting Jason, buying dynamite, and your entire plan today. I didn't move against you earlier because I was waiting. Waiting for you to reveal all your cards. I took the now useless remote from his hand and crushed it lightly before his eyes. Now, your cards are played. It's my turn. Ethan looked at me, the madness fading from his eyes, replaced by endless despair and fear. He suddenly turned, running madly toward the cemetery exit. Want to run? Leo gestured, 2 shadows flashed out, pinning Ethan down from left and right. He struggled futilely like a dead fish. I walked to him, looking down. Ethan, you absolutely shouldn't have acted here. This is my child's resting place. You disturbed him. My voice was calm, but the killing intent in my eyes was thick and unresolvable. So, stay here and accompany him. I drew a military knife from Leo's waist. Then, under Ethan's extremely terrified gaze, I stabbed it into his heart. Blood instantly stained this pure land. He twitched a few times, the light in his eyes faded rapidly. To death, he stared at me, mouth opening as if to say something. But I had no interest in listening. I pulled out the knife, wiped the blood on his clothes, and returned it to Leo. Clean it up. Yes. I didn't glance at his corpse again, turned, and left the cemetery. The sky had cleared unknowingly. Sunlight pierced the clouds, warming my body. I looked up at the sky, as if seeing an angelic baby smiling at me. Baby, rest in peace. All who hurt us have paid the price. Mommy will live well, carrying your share.